the first thing you need to do is to understand your audience.
You need to know your audience.
The first thing is to know your audience.
The talk is not for you, it's for the audience.
I want to tell a story.
What's the main point?
Less is more.
What do you want people to remember?
The most significant bits of your result and the most important idea of your technique.
Don't lose yourself in details.
You should never introduce more than 3 definitions.
Never underestimate the level of misunderstanding that your audience can have.
You should practice.
Give test talks to myself 3, 4, 5, 6 times.
But I never practice.
I don't spend too much time practicing.
Just be yourself.
To prepare for a talk, the first thing you need to do is to understand your audience. Based on the audience, you need to sort of figure out whether you need to present a lot of technical material or you need to keep it at a high level and so on. The general approach followed while giving talks is to, structure your talk in such a way that there is something for everybody. The introduction should be such that anyone should in the audience should be able to follow, and the result statements and the overview should be such that most people who are familiar with your area should be able to follow and appreciate. And finally, the rest of the technical content should be such that at least the experts in your area should definitely be able to follow. Another thing that helped me was to attend talks who are by people who are well known for giving good talks and learn from them.
Again, this is like the same issue. I prepare exactly the same way I write papers at the very last minute. I don't think that's good practice. So the first talks I gave, I think, maybe were better in some regards because I made more conscious efforts to give practice talk. I think it's really important, especially when you're starting, to find very, very good people to give feedback. It's good to practice talking, especially with other students and stuff like this, but you really to give it to find them like most critical people you can and give the talk to them, and try to give it to people immediately in your area who understand the topic beforehand. You want to try, if possible, to give them the talk, to talk to them, and give the talk to people outside of your area, if possible. And I think it's good to do this at first, like pretty systematically, to try to get us to learn. You're learning. You can learn a lot about sort of what works or not, and you're maybe less defense. Now I feel like I'm so defensive when I'm designing a talk, and someone says like, "Why did you do this?" I'm like, "You know what? It's my talk. Like, yeah, like it's." No, but yeah, I think that's really good practice. Also, to make sure you give it to, there's like senior people have really, some of them have like weird rules of thumb and stuff like this that can be very helpful. Like Hotek, I remember Hotek helped me with my very first talk at Eurocrypt, Hotek Wee, and he told me something like, you should never introduce more than 3 definitions in the talk, or something like this. It's like stuck with like really like, yeah, like his whole thing was like, and I think this is very important in cryptography. We have like thousands of definitions and models, and it's like it's so easy to overwhelm an audience with like all of these intricacies. It's like really you want to pare things down as much as possible. This advice, I think, has stuck with me more than anything else. I don't really stick to his ultimatum, but this idea that like really as few definitions is like, if you can avoid giving a new definition without really corrupting the message, like do it. If you can, like obvious, there's like obvious things like, don't cover your slides with text and stuff like this. I personally, I guess I have a very particular talk style because I like hand draw everything always. The reason I do this is because I'm trying to, I think it's very helps to try to illustrate things, try to just even like writing by hand. I don't know, I feel like this engages the audience, but anything you can do to try to engage the audience, if it's telling jokes, if it's things that seem like unrelated to the actual research, like if it helps them pay attention, this is the win. So yeah, keep it simple, keep it, yeah, it's so easy to get lost in details. I remember when I was first giving talks, it's like, you know, yeah, I wanted to like put like all of these, you know, basically say something and then like the asterisk, like all of like if then else, like all of these conditional complex statements, but like really don't do that. Like maybe mention that it's more complicated, but like don't get into it because you'll just confuse everyone. Really, even if they're the most brilliant people, you really help them by keeping it as simple as possible. Tell them that maybe there's something they need to look at the actual paper, but think about what you want to communicate. Like, what is the key idea that you want them to take away? And really focus on that, and don't get lost in don't get too lost, I guess, in the truth. But yeah, obviously it's science, so it's like, don't forget about it. But yeah.
Yeah, talks are important. And I guess the first thing you have to know when preparing your talk is who is the audience. And, you know, most of the time, maybe these will be just cryptographers. Sometimes it will be a wider theory audience. And, you know, in a job talk, it will be beyond that. And you have to build your talk so that, you know, it works best for this audience, or, you know, for some common grounds, at least in the audience. And this could sometimes mean focusing less on your own work and, you know, explaining better the basics. But, you know, think about this as a service that you're doing the audience. Now, it's very important, and this may sound trivial, but you should think, you know, what is sort of like the main takeaway of the talk? Like, what do you want people to remember? And make sure you convey this, okay? So definitely don't try to explain everything, especially, you know, when I remember when I was young, I really wanted to say like everything, show like all the steps and everything that we do. And, you know, we worked very hard for this. But this doesn't necessarily do the job. You should really sort of like focus on sort of like the most important things and try to distill you know, the points that you want to make. And, you know, in order to do this, then you should feel free to sort of like oversimplify things and use like toy constructions or toy examples, even if this is sometimes cheating. And then you can be honest and say that it's oversimplified and that you're cheating here and there, and that's fine. The point is that you want to convey an idea as simply as possible. Now, you know, visualization could be powerful. Okay, so, you know, sure, use pictures and you can also use animations, but you don't want to be too distracting. Okay, so if you're going to use a picture, there better be a good reason to use this picture. Okay, I don't know. I remember when I was young, I would try to put these funny pictures, and, you know, the adversary, you know, is your favorite figure, etc. It's nice, but it could be kind of distracting. Okay, so you know, as the years went by, I found myself making slides that are, you know, becoming more and more minimal, and also fewer and fewer slides. And I just like found myself just speaking more and explaining each and every slide, while really having every slide just convey like something very simple, and particularly have like very little text and stuff like that, or just like, you know, one picture or something of that sort. Another thing that sometimes we don't realize is that Okay, so the beginning of the talk is obviously important. This is where you should sort of like get the attention of your audience and make them want to listen to the rest of the talk. But the end of the talk is also very important. So, you know, after you sort of like zoomed in on your results and then probably your techniques, you always want to zoom out back and, you know, put things in context and give the audience something to think about. Okay, tell them what are sort of like the next interesting questions. You know, try to provide some, you know, thought-provoking message. So I guess one last but not least, is that you should practice. Okay, so I don't know, like, you know, talking in front of the mirror or something like that may sound awkward, but it's actually very important, especially in the beginning. Okay, and in particular, you know, in short talks, if you're talking in conference, then I would advise like even writing down like what exactly you want to say, you know, like use the PowerPoint notes or something like that. And you should know, at least in the first few slides, exactly what you plan to say, and you should practice that. And, you know, once you make it through the first few slides, you'll be fine. But at least in the beginning, like the first few talks, I would recommend like practicing everything. Okay. You know, and then this is going to change as the years go by, but this is at least where you should.
For me, these two questions are very closely related, because the core of communicating what I have done and what I care about to other people is to extract the conceptual core. What's the main point? Why do I care? Why do I care? Why do I care? Why did I spend all this time on this project? So, and starting from why do I care, I can then communicate what the gist of the paper or what the gist of the research is about. I think that once I've written down or planned a talk starting from my perspective, why do I care, what I do then as a second step is that I look around and see what do other people care about, what is their perspective on similar things, why might they think that this is important, and I kind of see how to integrate this into the paper, and sometimes, or to some extent, also into a talk. In a talk, the time is much more limited, so often you need to cut much more branches, things that you could speak about. But in the paper, there's a little bit more space to put pointers and references, and to embed your own ideas into the bigger field. Personally, I find it very nice to read papers that are written in this way, because I want to feel and hear and know, why does the person who writes this paper care about this research? Why does the person who gives the talk care about this? This is what I want to hear. That's what I enjoy hearing. When someone instead gives a talk or writes a paper, trying to make it completely impersonal and saying, okay, so this is why other people might care about this research, then I find this very hard to listen to and care about, because it might be that the perspectives that are cited are not mine and are not even the perspective of the person who did the research. So then it's very disappointing. So for me, it's really everything has to start from why do I care about this, and then to extract the gist out of this and communicate.
The first thing is to know your audience. What would they enjoy listening to? This might be actually quite different from what you want to speak about. The next step is to plan the duration of the talk. Ideally, one should not plan to speak for more than 75% of the allotted duration, keeping in mind that there might be many questions for the remainder 25%. You can always have a few backup slides in case someone is particularly interested in some details. In terms of making slides, a top-down approach is quite useful. Start with a high-level version of the entire talk with placeholder slides. It need not have many details, but a short summary of what you want to convey in each slide. Your entire audience may not follow 100% of your talk, but try to aim for at least 70% of your talk to be accessible to almost everyone in the audience.
So to prepare a good research talk, you need to know your audience and try to think what do they need from your talk, and after that you will be able to prepare a good talk after spending enough time.
It's another one of these $100 million questions that, of course, the real answer depends on which paper you're presenting, of course, because that really can make a big difference. But of course, there are all the standard things. Don't give too many details. Be very careful about too many equations on your slides because people really cannot digest them. Even if that should be well known, you still see lots of conference talks where people basically copy LaTeX from their paper, and you have this 5 equation thing that they think you can digest in 10 seconds, which of course nobody can. So, giving ideas, again, is really important. You really want to think about what do you want people to take away from your talk. Instead of feeling good because you managed to include everything from your paper, you should instead feel good because you managed to actually send the right message. What do you want people to remember? In particular, of course, if you can come up with a message that is interesting enough that people actually read your paper, that's even better. But this again requires that you have to put yourself in the shoes of the receiver and not your own shoes. It's a little bit the same thing as writing it, except the format is different, of course. But still, that's the really hard part. Because you have just been through your paper, you read it 1,000 times before you submitted the thing. Now you're preparing the talk, everything, and therefore everything seems straightforward because you're on top of this thing completely, but your audience is not, right? So it's that's really the way you have to think about this. As hard as it is, it's notoriously hard. So I guess one just has to remind yourself about this.
When I gave my first talks, I think from a perspective now, they were horrible, right? Because they were probably unfocused, right? When you're maybe giving your first conference talk, you really want to show why this is cool and why you had to do all these things. But that's probably not the right strategy. So really, when you give a conference talk, focus on some very specific topic. Some what you maybe think is the core idea or the core novelty of your work, and then be just liberal in omitting stuff that doesn't serve the purpose of telling the audience how your solution really adds something new there. Don't lose yourself in details. Be maybe a little bit daring to make oversimplifications, right? Probably if you say so, okay, what I'm saying here is an oversimplification, no one in the audience is going to shame you for that. I think they're actually probably gonna be very happy about that. But start with from a simple core idea around which you want to develop the talk, and then of course if you're unsure, give practice talks, right? Present your talk to friends and solicit feedback.
Try to have very simple way of describing your results. I think that there's sort of this advice, I don't remember where I heard it, less is more. So, and that's especially true for younger students, and was true for me. that, you know, when you're giving a talk, you feel like, oh, well, I need to tell the listener this thing or that thing, but you soon realize that the talk is given from the perspective to benefit the listener, not to benefit the speaker in a sense. And so the less you say is more.
First, prepare the talk well in advance and practice a lot. I typically don't get a chance to do it, but on the occasions that I do, I feel a big difference. Second tip, try to find toy examples and metaphors that will gently introduce your problem or your solution. Never underestimate the level of misunderstanding that your audience can have. Third tip, try to recall all the failed attempts you had and the unsuccessful naive approaches you tried before getting to the actual solution. This not only adds a bit of a drama to the talk, but also enables in a better way to capture the intuition behind the actual solution.
So in my research talks, I want to tell a story. So the first thing is I sit down and I think about what is the message and what is the story that I want to tell. And I try to have every slide being motivated. So I want the audience to know why they should listen to this slide, because I myself find this very helpful in a talk. And again, it's very helpful, or it's very important to zoom out, as like for research talk, to zoom out as much as possible. So really say like, what is the most abstract, what is the most inherent about the problem, about the paper, and to get this, like to find this out and to get this message across. And I also try to make it interesting in the sense that I say, oh, like not say, okay, we did this and this, but maybe, okay, look at, so why should I care about this problem? Then what is the problem that I want to solve? And then maybe what is the first thing you would try? Why wouldn't that work? And in a step-by-step process. So really like you would tell a story, and not just a research story, but also like in real life, or write a book.
Create a good presentation is a lot of fun, and it's also very important. It shares some commonality with writing a paper, because half of the presentation is conveying about your result, and the other half is trying to convey some main technical ideas. So they have some similarity with writing the introduction and the technical overview of a paper. The most important thing I would say is to distill the most significant bits of your result and the most important idea of your technique, and build the story and the rest of the presentation around them. Keep reinforcing these take-home messages so that people take away remembering them. In terms of technique, because of the time limitation in a presentation, usually that you really don't have the space to go into the details. So for a talk, it's more important that you come up with a minimal story that illustrates the idea rather than kind of fully explain the idea. There are multiple ways to try to do this. One could explain the approach for a much simplified case. One could take out an important lemma that the statement itself is natural and intuitive, and just explain the proof of the lemma. And sometimes that you want to present the technique at an intermediate abstract level without exposing a lot of the details, and decide what to include in the intermediate abstract level and what to not include, so that you have a self-contained and self-consistent story. The talk is also very different from writing a paper. When writing a paper, you know that the reader is most likely going to be someone in the area, or even someone in the same sub-area. So then the reader will share a lot of common background with you, including understanding of the terminology, understanding of the motivation, understanding of the background, and even some of the prior techniques. In that sense that it's easier. However, when giving a talk, depending on audience, you might not have this shared background. Therefore, it's absolutely important for you to think for your audience. What terminologies are they used to? What kind of background they have? And sometimes you even need to adapt the take-home message or the most significant bit according to the audience. Think about not just what you want to say, but also think about what your audience want to hear, what they would get, what would be the most valuable for them to get from your talk. And preparing a talk is also different because writing a paper, the main tool you have for conveying your ideas is words. But when doing a presentation, you'll have a lot more tools, including colors, font, different font size, graphics, animation, and so on. So this is a much richer set of tools that can help you to put emphasis on different things, on things that you want to put on. But at the same time, that the talk is harder to do because the audience does not have the luxury to decide to reread a paragraph or rewind you when you're giving the talk online. So they're in some sense in a passive state that they're following what you're saying and the pace is set by you. So in this case, you want to make sure that the talk transitions from one slide to the other in a smooth fashion. And each of the slides is introducing one delta of the idea. And this idea is not too overwhelming for the audience to get. Otherwise, it's easy for them to lose track. Also, some visualization tricks can help. For example, to make your slides on related ideas, maybe there are a span of a couple slides are all for one purpose, then you might want to make sure that these slides roughly visually appear the same so that the reader or the audience does not get exhausted by just trying to pass what the slides look like and reading different structure of the slides. And in order to have such good planning, one thing that I tend to do is an extensive period of preparation before I actually start making the slides. I will draw on paper different slides, what are the words to write on them, and what are the graphics roughly I want to put on them, and how the animations would look like. And this process can take quite long because sometimes I will go back and forth. As I go into the second half, I realize I actually want to change some of the notations in the first half or some of the graphic representation in the first half. But nevertheless, it will take significantly less energy to change things when you're in this planning phase than to do the similar change when you're already in the slides making phase. So overall, I think it saves you a lot of time if you can actually plan out all the visualization and how the talk would roughly look like before jumping to making.
And I think that there are two things to it. First of all, which is maybe the hardest, you did your great research, you often worked a year, sometimes longer on that, and you got accepted at a conference, very exciting. 95% of what you worked on, you don't necessarily want to convey, you just want to relate the results at the end, right? Which is shouldn't be too much of your entire talk. And I think what's often overlooked, and it's very hard to do, you should come up with a very nice motivation, why you're doing that, which is really easy to follow because the majority of people in the room will not, will have a different background from you, right? So first of all, the motivation, and then I'll try to focus on a nice pedagogy. So whatever you did, try to explain that very well, kind of more like a tutorial type of thing, right? Make it easy, use a lot of graphics, very few words in PowerPoint or whatever presentation software you're using. And then at the end, show your impressive results, right? And also don't show all results. This is something I'm still struggling with. My students are struggling with that, right? Typically in a paper, we've done several different things, but I think for presentation at a conference, Just maybe look at the 1 or 2 results that are also easy to convey, that impress people. And if people get curious about the work, they have essentially all the time in the world to read your paper, or maybe contact you by email or whatever, right? That's the one thing. The other thing is train. If I give important talks, I still give test talks to myself 3, 4, 5, 6 times, right? Like every day in advance of the conference. I give test talks sometimes to my students, often just to myself, because it really helps that you know the material, that you know when you're in slide 2, and on slide 8 there will be this and this content, and that really helps being well prepared. Almost know your presentation by heart. I think that greatly helps.
Well, I don't prepare for my talks. What do I mean by that? Of course, I prepare the slides, but I never practice my talks. And I never did, also during my PhD. But I think it's very important to practice. I remember during my very first presentations, because I was not practicing, I was very stressed at the beginning of the talk. And I think if I would practice, I wouldn't be stressed. So number 1 rule is to practice. Okay, and then based on your experience, you will not need to practice after some time. And then another quick comment that I have about the slides, how to prepare good slides, is that it's very important to not include a lot of information on the slides and find a way to present involved ideas on the slides in a simple way. And that can take a lot of time. So you need to think a lot on how to present difficult ideas just from slides. So just try to allocate a lot of time to be able to prepare slides that are understandable and can describe difficult concepts in a simple way.
The most important advice, in my opinion, for preparing a good research talk is to always think about your audience, right? That the talk is not for you, it's for the audience, right? And the audience is doing you a big favor by being there and listening to you, right? Taking time out of their, valuable time out of their day to listen to you. So you should keep track of kind of their energy, right? What is the energy that the audience member has, and how are you asking them to spend that energy, right? Because every time you explain something detailed to them or a concept to them or introduce a new idea to them, you're expending audience energy, right? To have them understand that. So, use that energy budget wisely. Think about that there's a finite energy budget that each audience member has, and you're asking them to spend it on things with you. So plan that through carefully. Plan out, what do you want to focus on? What do they really want them to come away with? And remember, you're there to teach them, right? Like every talk is to teach someone something new, right? And everyone wants to learn. Like we all love learning things. So, I would also just argue that just always keep that in mind, right? That you want to teach them something and they have a finite energy budget and you want to just bring their attention to certain, key ideas and key things. And if you do that, then I think you'll have a good talk.
So I've really got some good advice to the youngsters. When I was a youngster, I tried to do talks which were kind of mimicking the talks that I thought were good. So I saw someone and I thought, okay, I want to give a talk like that. So you try to be someone else. And actually that never works. So the way I give a talk, I'm just me. And I just kind of relax and I don't kind of think about how I'm presenting it. I just present it naturally without trying to be anyone, without trying to convince, so just be yourself, let yourself come through, and it's more authentic. And it's also because you're not thinking about trying to be someone or trying to give a talk, you're actually just being a bit more, a bit more off the cuff, a bit more relaxed, you're easier to respond to questions because you're not thinking about other things. You're just thinking about, hey, I'm going to have fun, I'm going to give a talk, and all I want to do is present what I'm doing, and I want to give a bit of myself.
Let me think about it. So So okay, I guess one piece of advice I would have is to try to give people a sense of what the talk's going to be about, the results, and some high level pretty early on, as early on as possible. If you're going, if you've already spent 15 minutes and haven't gone to what the results are or what the talk is about, that's usually a bad thing. Other than that, I spent a lot of time on structure of the slide and thinking about how I would structure the talk. What are the main components I want to get across, and what are things that maybe I don't need to mention, which results, probably can make it into the talk, which results are the important ones. I don't spend too much time practicing. I find that if you practice giving a talk a lot, it can make you stiff, or you just repeat some sort of memorized lines, and I don't find that too helpful. So I try to spend more time on having the high level structure of the talk and knowing rough outline of what I want to say in each part, but not actually practicing, like exactly what I want to say for each slide.